Good evening. I'm Catherine Hill. I'm president and CEO of Levine Museum of the New South. And I'm so glad you joined us tonight for our Southern Accents program, Creating Latin Music in the New South. Nobody speaks to that topic better than Tony Arreaza. I love Tony's story. He did a podcast with WFAE, and you should really check that out. Here's the really short version. Tony arrived in Charlotte in 1993. He was going to be an American rock star, but he was from Venezuela and he struggled some with the language. And so he started his own band, Ultima Nota, sorry. And except that he had a hard time getting bookings. There was no Latin music scene in Charlotte at that time, so he started his own production company. And he's been producing Latin music in Charlotte and all over the Southeast ever since. Tony was the cultural events director for Charlotte's Latin American Coalition from 2005 to 2015, and he grew their cultural events into a revenue-producing, vibrant, industry-leading program. And Tony works with the Levine Museum of the New South too, producing a whole bunch of programs for us, including Dia de Muertos. He's just one of our favorite partners. Sam Byrd has, I think, the longest business card on the planet. He is Director of College Transition and Alternative Credit Programs in the Division of Continuing Education and Workforce Development. And he's an adjunct assistant professor in the business department at Hostas Community College, City University of New York. His book, The Sounds of Latinidad, Immigrants Making Music and Creating Culture in a Southern City, was published by New York University Press in 2015. He received his PhD in anthropology from the City University of New York Graduate Center. And get this, 6 years ago to the day, Tony interviewed Sam about that book at Levine Museum of the New South. What a perfect pairing. Welcome, Sam and Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. So, first I want to thank the Levine Museum. It's one of my favorite places in Charlotte. In fact, it's also one of the first places I went to when I came to Charlotte, I think for the first time in 2008. But we're here with Tony Arreaza, a famous Carlotan, as we say. And just to get us started, Tony, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about, sort of the history of Latin music in Charlotte. I remember you telling me a story about sitting at, Central Piedmont Community College, like as a teenager with your guitar, but bring us from when you first came to Charlotte to sort of how did things get started for you and for other Latino and Latina musicians in Charlotte in the 1990s or early 2000s?
Sure. So I moved to Charlotte in 1993. I was a hungry rock and roll musician, long hair. I used to play guitar maybe 8-10 hours a day. And I just moved to make it in the rock and roll dream lifestyle. I thought that I knew English, and I actually realized that I didn't know English. So it was tricky. I spent a couple of years playing the typical American rock, and there was actually not a Latino scene music. I remember there was only a very few Mexican restaurants, maybe four of them, and then the only way that you can actually listen to music it was in people houses, and but forget about going to a restaurant and having a live music or even going to a show. That was no way. I met my friend Fred maybe late 90s, and one day we were just playing in my apartment, we grabbed the acoustic guitar and we start playing Latin music. And that's when I realized, man, nobody else is doing this. And it sounds so organic, it sounds so natural that I just said to myself, maybe this is what I need to do in here. But I didn't move all the way from Venezuela to the US to play music in Spanish. So it took me a minute to realize this is what I really need to do here. So I started to play less with the typical rock American groups, and I started to play more with Fred. And at that time, it was just me and him with the acoustic guitar. And I remember this place called Hemingway's, it was located right across from CPCC. And we knew the owner, and I think he gave us like Thursday or Wednesday. And a few weeks later, we were playing Fridays and Saturday. And it was tricky. We were playing, there was not that the Latino population. There were very, very few people. And we were playing in front of people that don't speak the language, but they would keep coming back. And you know, it was, and that's when we realized, man, music is the language, not the lyrics, the whole package. And a few months later, we decided it, or we talked about, let's just try to find more musicians and let's make a band. And that's when Los de Paulo, it was my first rock en español group, began playing in restaurants and a few festivals, because there was not that many festivals. And that's kind of how it started.
And so from Los de Paula, you also had La Rua, right? And you had Carlotan Rock. Can you tell us a little bit about Carlotan Rock and how you started getting into the promotion business, into the sort of, you know, creating festivals and shows and what have you?
Sure. So with La Rua, I feel like with La Rua, we opened that door and we started playing in American venues. See, with Los de Paula, it was mainly Mexican restaurants or Hispanic venue. You know, I don't want to say that we were not allowed to the American venues, but it wasn't the time. With La Rua, we did that. We started playing in the main venues of the city, and we all are big fans of Latin music and music in general. And I remember, Sam, if I wanted to see a Latin rock show, we either have to go to Miami or have to go to New York. And it's a long drive. And one day I say, guys, but we, a local band, we're playing here and we're putting 300-400 people. What about if we started bringing these big groups? And that's kind of how it started, the Carlotan Rock idea. We came up with the name Carlota because if you want to translate Charlotte into Spanish, you will say Carlota. And that's how we came out with the name Carlotan Rock. And you know, we try to contact the booking agents and managers, and nobody was getting back to us. Somehow, we found the contact information from these groups in Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, and we reached out to them, and that's kind of how we started doing shows and concerts, etc. My side of the events organizer, I remember with La Rua, we were getting popular. We were getting a lot of shows, and we were trying to find somebody to be our agent, or at least to represent us. And the answer was, you are not Latino enough because you're playing rock, but you are not rock enough because you're singing in Spanish. So we were dealing with that. We were not playing the typical salsa, bachata, merengue. And rock, we were not singing in English. So that's when I say, okay, I'm just going to do this. So I don't ask me how, but I decided that I'm gonna be the one to call the venue to figure it out how we can open for these big bands when they're in tour in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I start traveling, and that's how I learned how to do a tour, how to route shows, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the amazing thing that I realize is that I think you had both the internationally known bands, the Molotov and the
Mhm.
Los Amigos Invisibles and these different bands
Sure.
from all around Latin America. But you also had the local bands. You found bands in Charlotte and in the the Research Triangle area, bands from Atlanta and different areas to come and play these festivals. So you had a mix of both. You had a mix of like promoting the local Latino music and musicians from the region, but also bringing in these internationally known artists that were sort of world famous, but had never played in Charlotte before, right? I mean, I want to bring it up yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was gonna say one of those things that when I was calling those international groups, and we say Charlotte, North Carolina, but who's gonna see us, man? That's the South. And I say,
Mhm.
yeah, I have a local band, and I show them videos and photos. Remember, back then, social media, you couldn't really, it wasn't what it is now. And
Yeah.
I say, that picture that you have for Charlotte, for North Carolina, we have Latino, we have fine venues, and we have a population that will support the show. So that was the first reaction that we got from those international bands. They, of course, that they wanted it to come, but they didn't want it to come and play in front of 20 people.
Right. Yeah.
So anyhow, that
so you were able to show them that you
it.
could get a few hundred people. You could pack
Mhm.
the arena. You could have a nice theater like the neighborhood theater, just full of people,
Sure.
energetic and ready
Yeah.
to dance around. I want to bring you up to the sort of the founding of Ultima Nota. I remember when I first came to Charlotte and I first met you. You sort of just mentioned off the cuff, hey Sam, I have this band that I play with. We kind of play like cheesy cocktail music, and we play at a restaurant. You probably won't like it, but you should come and check it out. There are other bands, they're better than whatever. And so I came, and what I realized is, yes, sometimes you played some cheesy pop songs, but you gave it a twist. And you also, the other thing I thought was interesting is you had this great community of people who would come to the shows, other musicians, just local folks, families, right? You got a lot of, I remember from the very beginning, you got a lot of weddings and birthdays and different, just to kind of, and it was just a way to kind of keep playing music. I know you had just had a son, right? You had a young kid at home. It was a way to kind of keep playing music and just keep things moving. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Ultima Nota, how it sort of progressed from that, early days, and some of these pictures are from that, first year or two of when you were playing together as a band to what Ultima Nota is now, and how you see the band today. Yeah.
Well, it's a totally different band. If you ask me, Ultima Nota after the pandemic and Ultima Nota before the pandemic, I created Ultima Nota because my wife got pregnant, and I have been playing Latin rock for the past almost 20 years. In Latin rock, you don't really make that much money. You cannot walk to a restaurant or a wedding and just play rock en español. So
right. People don't
thought
dance
to Fred,
like they want to dance to cumbia, salsa.
I thought
right.
to Fred, which is thanks to Fred, I've been able to discover playing Latin music in the US. And I say, hey man, why don't we create this thing? It's gonna be a moneymaker. We're not gonna have to rehearse much. We already have that chemistry, right? And I don't want to go and sound like a bachata or a salsa because we're not, our DNA is rock and roll, but let's just mix it up. And that's kind of how Ultima Nota started it with my friend Joshua. And it's actually the same people. It's Oscar, Isaac. If you think about it, Joshua moved to Florida a few years ago, but it's almost like a family. We know each other so well, and we enjoy playing music together. So that was Ultima Nota. We hardly rehearsed. Sometimes if we wanted to play a new song, we practice in the sound check during the sound check, and then we play it. And that's kind of how it was. It was never meant to be a band that we will write our music. We were, first of all, because we hardly rehearsed and we didn't have time for that. So it was just, let's play, let's do wedding, let's learn all of that music that people want to listen to it. And because we like rock music and stuff like that, it was very important to us to also play that music and do that twist that you're talking about. And maybe let's pick up a song by the Police, but let's have the whole a cumbia rhythm, or a song by U2, and let's have a salsa feeling. And that's kind of and it was beautiful because we were mixing both of the world and both of the crowd, the American side or the Latino side. They were actually enjoying the project. So all of that was until the pandemic came, and then I realized that it was a pandemic, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, because everything that I've been doing at organizing festivals and concerts, which is, to me, is involved music and my heritage and my culture, and play music. Both of those worlds, they gather people, and that's what you couldn't do. I'm very, very blessed that I have a studio in my house, and I just sit down with my guitar and spend hours and hours and hours, and I was getting inspired of all of these ideas, and then I realized I haven't actually grabbed my guitar and just enjoy playing for myself, because I was just so busy playing all of these covers, or just thinking about, oh, I got this quinceañera, or I got this festival. But with the pandemic, I was just playing for myself. And that's kind of how I got inspired. I convinced the guy. I think at the beginning they thought that I was a little crazy, that, I was just reaching out to them and, hey, check this out. And then I remember the very first song that we did, I recorded it, and I recorded it really bad, like halfway. And but we put it out, and it sounded so natural, and it got that chemistry that we have, because we have been playing for 12 years. And anyhow, that's kind of how that Ultima Nota new phase began. Right now, at the moment, we haven't been playing in restaurants and stuff like that, because we just rather play in places where we can play our music. We still enjoy playing covers, but right now it's just, we love our music so much that it's like I say, it's a totally different band with the same members.
Yeah, no, it's transformational, right? So I know we have a video to show. Can you tell us a little bit about this video, and a little bit about sort of how the song came about, and what you were thinking when you were writing it?
So the whole process took me 2 years. It's recording on an album. It's a lot of work, and especially when you don't have all of the resources. With COVID, it was really tricky to record, and sometimes we have to record one by one. And I remember having this idea. I got inspired by, I'm a huge Rubén Blades and Willie Colon. I'm a huge fan, and I love how they write. And I was working really hard on the music, picking up the right chord, the right feeling, and I played it to my wife. She's a wonderful writer. She wrote 2 songs for in the album, and I have songs about funny stuff, by love, by Black Lives Matter. So I have all of these songs, and then she say, I think you need to write a song about the immigration reform in our community. And that was like, that's it. And from that moment, I started bugging her, why don't you write something? Help me. So she wrote a poem, which is those poems are the verses, and it's basically 4 scenarios of people that we actually know that are the typical example of what Latino immigrants faces in the U.S. I took that poem, the piece of paper, and I remember there was one night that Oscar and Fred was at the studio, and they wrote the pre-chorus and the chorus, and that's kind of how Mi Sueño began. I love this song so much that I talked to my friend Edgar Marcano, which is the one that have done all of our videos and a documentary that we also have. And I say, I want to create a video that speak of what the music is about. And that's when I applied for a grant at the Arts and Science Council. And I really wanted it to have that community feeling. So I went and talked to members of the community, leaders like Manolo Betancourt, Estefanía Arteaga, Jennifer de la Jara, and all of those wonderful leaders that thanks to them, I feel like they inspire the video and the song. And I'm very, very proud of the video, and it's out there, and it's very honest, it's very organic, it's very real, and that's the single of the whole album.
Great. So, and the video is called Mi Sueño, right? My Dream.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And so, are we gonna listen to it? I think that was the plan. Yeah. Here we go.
Sure.
Señoras y señores, voy a contar una historia que todavía no se ha acabado. Jennifer vino del 5, casi no habla español, tiene recuerdos lejanos del río, el desierto y el terror. Iba a graduarse este año, pero la escuela dejó. ¿Cuál es el punto? Pregunta. Sin papeles, ¿qué puedo hacer yo? Hay personas en la vida que sueñan con un mundo mejor, pero solo necesitan acceso a la educación. Ricardo era un cirujano y aquí reparte Amazon. Cientos de cajas repletas de objetos que él no compró. Marta le limpia unos gringos, siempre le pagan en cash. No se pregunta si ella, por eso no les cobra más. Hay personas en la vida que sueñan con un mundo mejor, pero solo necesitan
negocio propio. Ya son 50 empleados, paga todos sus impuestos, pero igual siempre vive asustado. Hay personas en la vida que sueñan con un mundo mejor, pero solo necesitan reforma a la inmigración. Tu sueño, construyendo esta nación con empeño. Mi sueño, tu sueño, construyendo esta nación. Mi sueño, tu sueño, construyendo esta nación con empeño. Mi sueño, tu sueño, inspirando esta canción. Tu sueño, construyendo esta nación, inspirando esta canción.
And we're back. So it's a great video, Mi Sueño, right, from Ultima Nota. I wondered, just thinking about that video and, some of the other songs that you have on the album, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just your personal, but also, the band and just sort of your perception of how things have, what's been happening in the last 6 or 7 years. I was reminded today, you posted actually on Facebook a picture of us from 6 years ago, in person at the Levine Museum, but sort of we're back right where we were. But at the same time, the last 6 years, there's a lot that's happened in the last 6 years. I mean, even, just sort of going through the different events and different things that have happened. I mean, we obviously had in 2016, later in 2016, police killing of Keith Lamont Scott and the riots and protests around that in Charlotte. We had the election of Senor Trump, right? Mm-hmm. And all the anti-immigrant sentiment that sort of brought to the surface around the country. We had all sorts of other things happen over the last 4 or 5 years. How do you think, I know this has affected you personally. I know that you in terms of, the way that you think about things and your family and your community. But also, how do you think Charlotte and Latinos, particularly in Charlotte, have sort of, what has it been like over the last 6 years? I assume it's been fairly intense.
What a ride. It has been a ride, man. And because your question, and that's why we wrote that song, because our immigration system is broken, and it has been broken, and there is not much that we can do, and that's actually why we wrote that song. But as far as Charlotte, I can tell you that we have a very vibrant Latino community, and it's since you were here, now there's a lot more Hispanic and Latinos. We still have to keep working and making Charlotte a more welcoming city. It has come a long, long way, but yeah, these past 4 or 5 years, it's been really hard. It's been really hard for my community. There's still a lot of fear, and we still have the same problem that we used to have when you were here back. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to
and
some of the immigration marches, going to some of the protests, you know, and the problem still hasn't been solved, right? It still hasn't. There hasn't been, you know, any resolution to you know.
So with
folks' situation,
so with our music, that's kind of our weapon, or that's kind of some kind of a relief for our community. If you see the video, we showcase the 4 story, but at the end, we're here making this country a better country. And you also see an integration, because at the end, we all having it a good time. You see some Caucasian people dancing salsa, some African American people dancing salsa, and that's influenced by us, the immigrants. And that's kind of I didn't want to end this on sad, because the reality is that the immigration is broken, right? But I wanted it to make a statement, and I wanted it to, you know, we are also working every day to make this country a better country.
Yeah, no, and I got that sense as well listening to the album. You know, I've been listening to it the last few days, and you know that there's even just the song titles, but Esperanza, you know, hope, and I got this sort of optimism from it, you know, and just hopefulness, and just thinking towards the future. I also wanted to play a short clip of you guys covering another artist, one of my favorite artists, Manu Chao, from a protest march from 2013 to let people know that, you know, this is not just the first time that Tony or Ultima Nota has been, you know, sort of active in politics, but also that, you know, just to put you in the mindset of what, you know, the history of some of this. So if Alex wants to play a little bit of that, we can maybe cut to that for a second.
Sure.
We're trying to be happy, but you're not giving us that chance.
Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correr es mi destino, por no llevar papel. Perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino, yo soy el que ley. Para la ciudad del norte yo me fui a trabajar. Mi vida la dejé entre Ceuta y Gibraltar. Soy un carraya del mar, fantasma en la ciudad. Mi vida va prohibida, dice la autoridad. Sola voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correr es mi destino para burlar la ley. Perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino, yo soy el que da ley. Mexicano, clandestino, boliviano, clandestino, hondureño, clandestino, no me llamen ilegal. Solo voy con mi pena, sola mi condena. Correr es mi destino, para burlar la ley, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino por no llevar papel, hondureño, argentino, salvadoreño, no me llamen dominicano, venezolano, colombiano, no me llamen ilegal. Muchas gracias.
I got my eyes watered.
Bring back some memories there.
Yeah.
But you know, from the protests that I've been to, I mean, you know, music plays a major part in sort of gathering people together and getting people motivated. But I think, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it's not just Tony. There are lots of important, you know, activists and people who are on the front lines in Charlotte and other places advocating for immigration reform, for Black Lives Matter, for, you know, gender and sexual equality and things like that. So, I mean, you know, it's not just that music is the be and end all, but I think that one thing that we can do is, I mean, you mentioned Ruben Blades, right, is just sort of reflect and sort of put into words and into sound what's going on around us, right? I know we had a question from the chat, a comment or a question. Alex, did you want to bring it up? Oh, here we go. So, Tony, you know, I don't know if you want to answer this. What are some of the hopes and predictions for Charlotte's Latin music scene in the next decade? That's a good question. So where do we go, you know, moving forward in the next decade?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the goals of putting this album is to kind of it's a showcase of how Latin music sound and how Latin music is created in Charlotte. So I use a lot of guest musicians from another group, and I always been so proud of the Latin music scene because we have amazing groups, amazing artists, amazing dancers, amazing performers. So hopefully, my hope is that we are not only going to get invited to play on Cinco de Mayo or during Hispanic Heritage Month. I feel like we should get invited any time of the year to play in any festival, and it doesn't have to be a Latino festival. So that's kind of my hope with this album, that you know, we can participate in more broader in the events and in the stuff that's happening in the city.
Great. I mean, one thing I would add to that, and then again, just this is me as a historian and scholar of this music, is that you know, Latin music is not new to the United States. You know, if you look at the literature, and you know, it's not just black and white in the United States, as many people would you know, maybe have you believe, but you know, there have been Latino musicians, whether it's from Cuba or Mexico or other places across Latin America, who have influenced what we might call American popular music from the late 1800s, you know, to the present. There's a great book by a guy named John Storm Roberts called The Latin Tinge, which talks about the influence of tango and mambo and danzón and habanero back in the early 1900s. You know, you can think of rock in the 1950s. You know, some of the rock songs had that kind of clave beat to them. You know, if you listen to Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, things like that, you know, it's not just sort of, you know, black and white, you know, rock and blues. You know, all those things had interactions with Latin America, and a lot of Latin American musicians were listening to American and British musicians as well. And so there's been a lot of cross influence, cross pollination throughout the generations. I mean, I was always interested to hear what musicians Tony and some of the other you know, folks in Charlotte were listening to, and you know, and you know, sort of to see what the influences were. And I love to hear all the sort of you know, interesting and esoteric bands in English and Spanish
Mm-hmm.
that folks would listen to, because it's not just a one-way street, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the beauty
Um,
about music diversity.
mhm.
I feel like, uh, you know, back in Venezuela, you put the radio back then when I was growing up, and you can hear, I don't know, a song by Journey, I guess, and then the next one is Juan Luis Guerra, and
Mhm.
that's how I was growing up, and I think it's just beautiful because it makes you appreciate music uh, even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see there's a question here as well from Gretchen Frederick. What artists and groups are you listening to currently? Who is inspiring you musically right now? I'd love to hear the answer to this question too, Tony.
Whew, man. Ah, I have been listening, especially throughout this pandemic. I'm more into the all of these independent groups. Uh, that, to be honest with you, I don't even know some of their names. Because with music and with Apple Music and Spotify, it's a totally different world. But I'm still listening to my root. I'm a huge Andres Calamaro fan, and I feel like I will be listening to him until the end of my life. Let me. I gotta think about it. I'm really into a Venezuelan group called Rawayana,
Mm.
and I love what they're doing, and the way that they fusion reggae music with pop. Where else? You see, that's one of those questions that block your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You can never remember
but
the names when
yeah,
you want to. Yeah.
yeah. But
Well, what we should
I'm
do is
still.
we should start a Tony playlist is what we should do. And you can share with everybody the songs that you're listening to.
Sure.
I had a related question to this discussion about music, and that is, as well as just being a musician, you also live in Charlotte. You travel around the South. I know you've gone to Atlanta and Miami and Florida and Charleston and different places. Virginia Beach, we went there a couple times. How do you situate your music and just your personal sort of identity in terms of the South, and being in the South, being Southern? Do you consider your music to be Southern? Do you consider how do you feel like music interacts
You're
with
talking about the music that I write, the album that I
music
did
that
with Ultima Nota. Of
yeah
course, yeah, it's Southern because it was created here, and it has all kind of influence. If you listen to the album, it has blues because I'm a huge blues fan, and
I
I
was going to
can
bring that
play
up.
a
Yeah.
bolero, I can play a bolero, I can play a flamenco, and gonna you're gonna hear the blues influence because I'm a blues player. It's part of my DNA. But of course, it's a southern album. We have funk, disco music. We have boleros. We have salsa. But it was created here in the South, and I think it's very important to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. No, and I agree. I'm leading you on with some of these questions, but I think the other thing to
Okay.
mention
Yeah.
is that one of the things that I've noticed is the parallel lives, the similarities between a lot of Latin American culture and what we might call Southern culture. Whether it's barbecues,
Mm-hmm.
the sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And belonging to a place, the musical feeling, right? You talk a lot about this, sort of the feeling, right, of the music, that maybe it's in a different language, but it has that feeling, that sort of that heart to it, right? That it's hard to describe, but it's just something that when you hear it, like this is a deep music that has deep roots,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
to it. I mean, you know, that's the sort of thing that I get from your music, and I also get from just, you know, I'm from Georgia, you know, just sort of growing up there, and hearing, you know, whether it's the blues, gospel, even, you know, rock, and you know, and some of the other genres that are around, pop. You mentioned funk. There's a lot of funkiness to your music. All that stuff comes out of the South, right?
Yeah.
But it's also in, you know, again, in rock and español, in some of the contemporary Latin music, you find a lot of that as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Now, here's a question. Yeah, I love the album cover art. How did you choose it and why?
Yes.
That's great. That brings us to sort of the artistic side of this.
So I really wanted it to maintain a community feeling with the album. I collaborate with a ton of other musicians in the music videos. I collaborate with members of the community, and when we were discussing what are we gonna do for the cover album, I really say, what about if we have one of our local painters to paint us a cover just for us? Of course, like I say, I have limited resources, and I was blessed to be able to get some grants, and I spent 4 times of the amount of money that I received. But that's what happened when you do things with passion. So anyhow, I have been a big fan of Nico Amortegui. He's wonderful, and I love how he does, and I'm a huge fan. So I reach out to him. I say, I don't have that much money, and this is what I want. And he immediately agreed, and he got excited. So I forward him the music because I really want him to kind of get inspired with our music. And I remember I sent him Esperanza, which is a song about hope and the Black Lives Matter movement, etc. And he got that Buena Vista Social Club feeling. And I remember he's reaching back and saying, yeah, I got this idea. I want to use bright colors. And when do you need it? I was like, I need it fast. And, you know, artists, you can't really rush. You know, when you're composing, when you're creating something, you have to get inspired. But it took him a few weeks, and then he kind of sent me this thing, and it just blew my mind. And I'm just so happy, and we're very lucky that he was willing to work with us. And it's you know, we love the cover, so just nice.
Great. And I mean, I guess maybe just to get into this a little bit more, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about, you know, how the music scene in Charlotte interacts with the art scene and the dancing, and, you know, just sort of food and just the whole sort of culture, you know, if we think of sort of cultural creation, you know, creating culture, right? How do these things interact with each other? I know you used to have festivals. Now we, you know, with COVID, we haven't had as many festivals. But, you know, what are some other ways that we you know, there's interactions between these?
Yeah, well, I think, and that's kind of what I've been doing. You know, my other side of me is organizing all of these events where I use our food, our tradition, our music to kind of celebrate our culture, or for some people to kind of educate them about how we celebrate, and, you know, what is an authentic Mexican taco, or you know, the art. So all of that, they're perfect because it's easy to establish a conversation with someone that you don't know about music, about food, about art, and that's what happened in festivals and community events. And I think they're perfect. and I feel like Charlotte is overwhelming with Latino events and celebration, which is beautiful. But I feel like every Latin America country has their own celebration. Once again, and I think that's wonderful. But in those scenarios, I think it's perfect to get to know our neighbors or our not Hispanic community to get to know us. And they can try our food, they can see our sense of humor or how we dance, how we celebrate. So to me, all of those aspects are very, very important. And it's us. It's a representation of who we are.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I would add, I mean, just from somebody who teaches in a business department, is that you have these small businesses. You have people starting companies, bakeries, and dance studios, and restaurants and bars and things like that. I mean, that's the thing that's been striking to me over the last 10 or 12 years or so since I started visiting Charlotte is the number of whether it's taquerias or whether it's the sort of I know there's a couple of bars and beer places and dance studios and just the space that's there for folks to start their own business and to become entrepreneurs, which is we're talking about the American dream. I mean it's a major part of it, is being able to kind of create something, create wealth as well.
Right now is I feel like it's the Venezuelan boom, because with so many Venezuelans moving to the US, and it feels like they all moving to Charlotte. And I'm Venezuela, so I'm happy because I feel it was so hard for me to find a Venezuelan back in the days when I moved here. So right now you really need to kind of see who is making the best arepa, or who's making the best tequeño, and then you see all of those business, hair salon, or electronic stores, and when you talk to those people, man, they're very smart, and they have this willing to make it and doing things right. So I'm very happy that they can find another home, another life in the US.
No, it's great. And I think also it speaks as well, I think, to the, from the song, Mi Sueño, how, you have folks who oftentimes have, careers and professions in their home country, right? And then they come here and they find themselves having to do something different. They may not have their, maybe they were a lawyer or a doctor. They can't get the license in the United States. And so they have to take another avenue, start a business or find a way to make a living. And it's just that kind of, figuring out a way to make things happen, that's so exciting.
In the video, there's this scene of a guy driving an Amazon truck and delivering boxes. He's a doctor. He used to be a doctor in Venezuela, and he's driving an Amazon truck here and delivering boxes. And that's very common. It's just that's how it is.
Yeah. I mean, I would also add that there is exploitation, right? There is, things where people aren't getting paid very much, aren't getting paid well. And I think we have to, work on that and figure out a way to improve that. I guess just to, sort of, well, I don't know if we have any more things in the comment, but just to kind of close out, one thing that always struck me about Tony and about, sort of our discussions that we always have about music and the arts is that you are a very ethical person. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit about, sort of, what is your sort of view on ethics and how can we sort of be more ethical, be better people in the world?
I don't know, man. I guess that's how my dad and my mom raised me, and I
See, that's a
remember
very
my
Southern
mom
thing to
saying,
say. That's a very Southern thing to say. That's how
there
my
you
daddy
go.
raised me. My mama raised me.
That's well. They say if you're ever gonna do something, do it right. If you're not
Mhm.
willing to do it right, don't even do it at all. And that's kind of the formula that I use in my life. I'm an honest person, and I always gonna be the same person. And I don't like shortcut because at the end it's a longer way. So I I just treat people the way that I want them to treat me, and that's the approach that I did when I decided to do this album. If I wanted it to represent my community, my music, because it's not just me, it's my bandmate, all of the guest musicians that participated, and it's a whole community, and that's why I wanted it a nice cover of the album and the sound and there was some time where my wife is, what are you doing? You have been there for over 10 hours and I'm trying to record a 20-second section that I don't get it. And it's just, I feel like, that's an example of when you really want to do things right and you want that, you know, you wanted it to sound real.
Okay, so I have another one last thing I'd like to ask you, and that is, Ultima Nota is not the only band in Charlotte, only Latin band in Charlotte. What are some other
No.
Latin music groups that people should be checking out? Are there any concerts coming up? Any shows?
Mhm.
Anything that people should be really looking out for, or maybe on Spotify or on streaming services, downloading an
Sure.
album, listening to some
Well,
podcasts?
yeah,
What's out there that people can get into if they're into
like I
more interested
say,
in Latin music? Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna name just a few. I'm gonna name the groups that we were able to work within when we were doing this album. My thought, Sam, was like the same thing that is happened to us, that we cannot play anywhere, we cannot do anything, is happened to our brothers, other
Mhm.
musicians. So that's how I got inspired to tell them, hey, do you want to do this crazy idea and do you want to collaborate on a song with us? And of course they went, but we got Bacalao Stars, which is, they're amazing. Their energy, and they're so creative. We have Orquesta Mayor that they to me they're not local band because they play everywhere, and they're very good. We got Reynaldo Brand, which is an amazing guitarist and singer. Oh my God. Anyhow, we have a group of dancers, composers. We have, like I say, we have a pretty amazing, vibrant community. We have Cafe Amarito. That I don't know if you know them when you were here. It's
Mhm.
a duo that do boleros. Um, you probably remember the flamenco guitarist Aris Quiroga, such
Mhm.
a talented guitarist. And they're here. They're within our community. They're in Charlotte, and sometimes people don't realize that they're part of our community.
Right. And where can people check these bands out? Are they playing in clubs? Are they playing in?
Yeah, I think Bacalao Star is playing this Saturday at the Rabbit Hole. We Ultima Nota are playing this Saturday too at Tosco Music Party. Not sure if you're familiar with Tosco Music Party, but they have been around for a long time and is in a very nice venue called the Night Theater. And we're sharing the stage with a bunch of other bands, and it's a wonderful event that's happening this Saturday. I know Orquesta Mayor is playing on May 1st at the Cinco de Mayo event. Anyhow, there is a lot going on. Now you really need to use Google to search what show you should go. But yeah, we're so lucky that we actually have choices, and we can just pick and choose where to go and see these bands.
Great. So go out there and listen to some music, and get involved. Don't be shy. Check out some of the great, amazing artists that are out there in Charlotte, playing music, making things happen. Tony, any last words? Anything else you want to?
No, I want to thanks to the Living Museum of the New South. And I need to acknowledge this, that 6 years ago today, March 30, we were discussing your book with Dr. Tom Hanchett at the Living Museum. And 6 years later, we're here talking about all of these wonderful things. So it's beautiful. When I saw it in Facebook, those memory thing, I was like, this is so special, man. It's like, wow. So I'm really glad that we're doing this, that I'm connecting with you again. And thanks to the museum to give us this opportunity to talk about the wonderful world of the Latin music. Great.
And so hopefully it won't be 6 years until we do this again. Maybe we'll find some way to do this before it's 6 more years.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Tony. And thanks to Levine Museum. And take care, everyone. Have a good night.
A mis brazos cansada, existir en tu cuerpo es un acto de full magia. Te quitas los zapatos y caes sobre la almohada. Aún dormida, a veces luchas contra las sábanas. Nena, tu pelo moreno, tus labios son rosas. Tú siempre pensando en lo bueno que gozas. Tantas raíces, difícil olvidar de toda la cultura que te dio mamá. Hay mucha gente confundida, no sabe la historia de su vida. El que critica no sabe, tú eres diferente, tú tienes la llave. Nena, 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 esta.
Tu piel negra brilla como espuma en la playa. Tus ojos ya cerrados hoy sueñan esperanza. Tu piel negra brilla como espuma en la playa. Tus ojos ya cerrados